Hello, I'm Jim Manning. I've been a Kennedy researcher for over 50 years. I'm the author of Patriotism Unhinged, available worldwide through online retailers. When John Kennedy was elected, but not inaugurated yet, one day his brother, Bobby Kennedy, had set up an office in the Justice Department. And a man appeared there with a business card and asked to see him. And the business card said he was a journalist for the paper Izvestia from Russia. Bobby thought about it for a while, and then he said, well, I don't know if I should see him or not because Jack's not elected yet. He said, but I don't want to be rude, so I'll see him, but I won't say anything. I'll just hear what he has to say. So they let the guy in, and they closed the door, and only Bobby and him are in that room. He says, Mr. Kennedy, first I want to tell you that I'm not the person on the business card. My name is Georgy Bolshakov, and I'm a KGB colonel, and I work in the Russian embassy down the street. He said, I'm here today at the request of Premier Khrushchev, who wanted me to convey his congratulations to you and your brother Jack for winning the election. He wanted me to tell you that he is looking forward to a better relationship with your administration than he had with the Eisenhower and Nixon administration. And that if ever there was anything that he could do to help you, all you would have to do is contact me, and then I would put you in touch with him. Nothing happened for a long time. Jack was inaugurated. And about 4 months into his presidency, slightly before the Bay of Pigs, Allen Dulles came to see him, and he told him that they had been working for 2 years, putting together about 2,000 Cubans who were in Florida in the Everglades and in Lake Pontchartrain, Louisiana, and they were being trained and outfitted and are ready to land on Cuba and try to reverse the revolution the same way that Castro did it before. He said that this idea was being managed by Nixon for General Eisenhower, and that its time was coming up, and he wanted to inform the president what was happening. And Jack Kennedy, having been in the Navy in combat, asked him, what about air cover? And he says, well, we've got some air cover, he was very vague. He said, we got some air cover in Nicaragua. We got 6 planes, and they'll be coming in whenever it's needed. And Kennedy said, well, I'll approve it with the stipulation that there's no American marked planes attacking Cuba. Allen Dulles assured Kennedy that would be fine. In the meantime, obviously what had happened was that of those 2,000 people that they were training for 2 years, Castro had slipped in quite a few spies. Cuba knew that this was coming, and Castro was all ready for it. When the planes that were supposed to fly in from Guatemala or wherever it was, the story, I think it was all made up anyway, he went to Kennedy and says, they're getting creamed on the beach. He says, you got to send in planes, you got to give me air cover. Kennedy refused to do it. He said, I told you I wasn't going to do that. It became a real mess. Kennedy took the blame for it. However, it was really Dulles who thought he could get away with that because he'd been getting away with plenty with Eisenhower administration and even Truman. After that happened, the Joint Chiefs of Staff were really, really upset with Kennedy. And they're dealing with the CIA, and they're saying, what can we do? We got to do something to get into Cuba. What can we do? Months later, they send a man over to talk to Kennedy. And the guy tells him, he's a spokesman for the Chiefs of Staff, he says that they have put a plan together called Operation Northwoods, and it's a false flag operation in which they would blow up a couple of our own buildings on the base at Guantanamo, nobody would be hurt. They would take a plane out of the air, most likely a Russian plane, full of people. Ships were coming and landing in Florida with people just, couldn't wait to get out of Cuba. Kennedy's listening to him, and then he says, we're going to blow up something in Washington, like maybe it's going to be a statue or something like that, not a building. He says, and also one in New York. He said, and that all put together would be reason enough that the American people would want us to go into Cuba. And Kennedy, he's looking at him and he's thinking to himself, this guy's a lunatic. But anyway, he brushes him off. He says, all right, we'll think about it. And when he leaves, Kennedy goes into a little office next to the Oval Office, a little private office, and his father and his brother are in that office. And so he approaches them and he says, I don't know what we're going to do. I'm dealing with lunatics. And he tells them about Operation Northwoods. And they're commiserating, well, I don't know what to do, and somebody brings up the meeting that George Bolshakov had with Kennedy when he was not inaugurated yet. They decided that what they would do is to contact Bolshakov and see if they could set up a back channel with Khrushchev. And they did do that. And that started a relationship between Jack Kennedy and Khrushchev that lasted for a couple of years. And that relationship was how they solved the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that relationship is how they stopped the major problem they had in Berlin with tanks facing each other. James Jesus Angleton had a double spy in Russia. And the Russian contacted him and said that he had seen the morning report. Now, the morning report is prepared by the CIA, I guess during the night, and is ready at 7:30 in the morning. And there's 7 people get a copy of it in the Oval Office, and they go through it. That's all the top problems in the world and what they tend to do about it. James Jesus Angleton, who was the counterintelligence whiz in the CIA, he decides he's going to find out how they got that. And so what he does is he puts some sort of a mark on each of the 7 reports that wouldn't be noticed, like a double period or whatever. And he asked the guy in Russia that when he saw the next one to let him know where the mark was. And when they found that out, they found out that it was Kennedy's copy that he was getting. So he was giving it to Bobby. Bobby was giving it to Bolshakov, and Bolshakov had a way of getting it to Khrushchev that didn't go through the Russian government. Only Khrushchev was seeing it. Under law, this was treason. And it was treason that I wouldn't want to try anybody for because of the good things that happened through it by not having a nuclear exchange over Cuba and not having another war in Europe over Berlin. Behind everything at the CIA, even though he had been fired for his betrayal of the situation in the Bay of Pigs by lying to Mr. Kennedy, he still was in control of the CIA. Even the new director, John McComb, called and talked to him almost daily about things, and James Jesus Angleton, Robert Turnbull Crowley, and William King Harvey, they all had their allegiance to Allen Dulles. They had a meeting on March the 1st, 1963, And they decided at that meeting, John McCone, Robert Turnbull Crowley, and James Jesus Angleton. At that meeting, they wanted to determine how to handle it. They said, well, if we were to take advantage of the legal system and we were to charge him, well, first of all, with the way the Congress is set up, we couldn't get him impeached. We wouldn't be able to do it. And then if we were able to get him impeached, we couldn't get 60 senators to vote him guilty. And even if we could do that too, he'd be halfway through his next term before there'd be a decision on it. The only thing that we can do is execute him. And that's the moment that they decided what to do. They had to do two things. They called in Bill Sullivan, the deputy director of the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover's right-hand man. They brought him over and they showed him some of the evidence, and they told him pretty much the same thing I've just said. And he went back to J. Edgar Hoover. They showed him the evidence. He hated the Kennedys anyway, so he agreed that he would work on it with them and cover it up and make things happen. The next thing was they had to get LBJ. So they sent for Abe Fortas and another guy, his name's escaping me, who was LBJ's gopher. And they brought them in and they told him the story. Then LBJ talked to them, and so they talked on the phone, and they said, well, let's get all the evidence together. They had tapped all the phones for the Kennedys at their homes, at Hyannisport, at Bobby Kennedy's home in Virginia. And so they were getting some things on the recordings. They had pictures of Kennedy and Bolshakov meeting. They had quite a bit of evidence. LBJ, according to the reports, was the weak link. He was afraid he might get killed too. He went along with it because at that time, after the trip to Dallas, he was going to be indicted along with Bobby Baker and Billy Saul Estes for all the crimes they had committed together. And he would not be on the ticket for the next election. They had all they needed at that point. They had all they needed. And from there was 63 meetings. Most of them held at Langley. However, some were held at some clubs in Washington Metro Club and one or two other clubs, gentlemen's clubs in Washington, D.C. Now the story continues with the how and the why and the who.